What are ghosts, phantoms, apparitions? In ancient Greek, the word eidolon signifies the reflected image of a once living person, having died and become disembodied, now reflecting back to us in a mirror-like form of their likeness or resemblance, presenting to the senses of the living. In Homer's Odyssey, one of the characters, Theoclymenos, says that he sees the idola of the suitors in the entryway to the court, well after they were all slaughtered. We discussed in our last video the sixth sense or organ used to observe such phenomena. The Stoics referred to this sense organ as the Hegemonicon and believed that it resided in the heart. This Hegemonicon acts like a pneumatic mirror that functions as a mediator and reflects data from the sensory realm to the intelligible realm and vice versa. The great Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said that just as houses at the edge of a body of clear water are reflected in its limpid surface, so also are external objects reflected in our psychic pneuma, with the obvious result that they are influenced by the state of the pneuma. Hence, the idea of cleansing one's pneuma became a matter of cleansing the heart, so as better to perceive and transmit the movements of beings across the different realms. In his work entitled De Somnis, Synesius attributed magical operations to the workings of the pneumatic synthesizer. In this way, it is similar to the theurgic modes of prayer across all religious and spiritual traditions that aim to cleanse and purify the heart through devotion, prayer, and ascesis. Except for the fact that Synesius locates the synthesizer in the head and not the heart. The functioning of the synthesizer works as follows. One must first recognize the object that contains its mirror image in the forms that are found latent within the human soul. The synthesizer then perceives the object and acts as a doubled mirror that communicates the reflection of the sensory material to the intelligible realm and from the intelligible back to the sensory. This synthesizer is the location of both images and visions, the phantasmal spirit, the fantastico pneuma. The pneumatic nature of the synthesizer allows for a constant communication between the macro and micro levels of the cosmos, without us even knowing about it and consciously willing the process. In his own words, the parts of this universe that sympathize and cooperate with man must be joined together by some means, and perhaps magic incantations provide such means, for they are not limited to conveying meaning, but they also invoke. He who understands the relationship of the parts of the universe is truly wise. He can derive profit from the higher beings by capturing, by means of sounds, substances, and forms, the presence of those who are far away. The Renaissance magus we have made a video about earlier on, Marsilio Ficino, adopted much of these ideas from Synesius. In fact, he translated De Somnis into Latin in 1489. Ficino also derived much of his astrological magic from a by now well-known work of occult magic entitled The Picatrix, whose original title is The End of the Sages by Means of Magic. As a side note, the Picatrix, or Gayat al-Hakim, is not utilized primarily by magicians of the Near East these days. In fact, the works of al-Kindi have become more heavily relied upon by present-day magical practitioners in the Arab-speaking world. These pneumatic movements and astrological projections were labeled under Ficino's theory of magic text, De Vita Coeletis Comparanda, as manifestations of the actions of Eros. All magical operations under Ficino are manifestations of Eros, whether of Eros itself, or a position contrary to Eros, like repulsion and division. This, of course, harkens back to the true transmitter of occult and esoteric practices in the Western tradition, by Empedocles, and his two cosmic forces of love, eros, and hate, strife. Ficino, however, was also deeply influenced by the works of al-Kindi. Al-Kindi was a famous astrologer and philosopher, and his works center around the idea that each star contains a unique and individual nature, but also that it interacts and communicates with its environment through emanation of rays. This is standard knowledge and not a real departure from the content of the Picatrix. However, al-Kindi also states that the four Empedoclean elements that constitute the entirety of matter, albeit in varying degrees and proportions, all emit rays themselves, such that no two beings are fully identical, since the rays interact in a multitude of combinations due to the mixing of the elements. Also, each object in itself is at the center of the host of radiations and fields emitted from all other objects in space and time. This also contributes to the unique nature of each object in the vast universe. With regard to magical practice, al-Kindi stresses that the first step in a magical operation is the faith of the performer. Certainly, the first and principal accident necessary to generate a thing through the model of the mental images is the wish of the man who imagines that the thing can be done. Just as Proclus says with regard to the Chaldean oracles that pistis, or faith, is the primary means of union with the One, faith, of course, being a theurgic power, pistis creates the silence within the soul, which corresponds with the silence of the noetic depths, where the pater resides with his partner, the primordial syzygy of the ineffable and the womb-like feminine silence. Fragments 144 and 145 in the Chaldean oracles indicate that the gods are originally without form, but later assume various forms to become visible to human eyes. The Okema Numa vehicle, what Synesius terms the middle body, is in fact a location of sensation and imagination which joins the body to the soul and the soul to the body. Al-Kindi also says, there are two kinds of actions by which, when they are carried out properly, a thing conceived in spirit comes true in action, namely verbal expression and the working of the hand. There are indeed certain speeches which, coming from the mouth of man, while expressing imagination, faith, and desire, actualize in the world emotions within individual beings. In another section of his work, De Radis, he states, besides, when man conceives of a material thing through imagination, this thing acquires an actual existence according to the species in the phantasmic spirit, spiritus imaginarius. Also, the spirit emits rays which move external things just as does a thing whose image it is. Therefore, the image conceived in the spirit corresponds in kind with the thing produced in deed on the model of the image through voluntary or natural work, or both simultaneously. This is why there is no cause for surprise if the theme of birth, which produces an image in the spirit of man, produces the same image in another subject, since the one does not differ from the other except only in substance. What is essential here is that to al-Kindi, all things irradiate in the universe and make their presence known at every point in space and time, varying only according to the intensity and influence each of the rays have on one another. And, most importantly, all psychic emotions, whether it be fear, pleasure, happiness, sadness, anger, or love, are also transmitted to the surrounding world through these radiations. To illustrate how the imagination and such thought forms can induce actual changes in the physical environment, we can look to the all-pervasive phenomenon of the evil eye. The evil eye is believed to emit demons that affect the target of the transmitter's envy or ire. Surprisingly, the evil eye is cast on someone not simply through their sight, but also possibly through their breath or words. It can come about either unintentionally or intentionally. Thomas Aquinas believed that the eye is affected by the strong imagination of the soul, and then corrupts and poisons the atmosphere so that tender bodies coming within its range may be injuriously affected. Rabbi Judah Loew suggested that, quote, "We know and understand that the evil eye concentrates within itself the element of fire, thereby emitting and flaming forth destruction where it casts its gaze." Jewish folk traditions inherited the idea of the evil eye from the ancient Babylonians. Pope Pius IX was believed to be unintentionally a transmitter of the evil eye. The unintentional version refers to individuals who are known as jettatori. This may result from their strong animus or personality. The second type of evil eye is the intentional result of jealousies and envies of men, gods, and spirits. If an evil eye was felt to be cast upon a victim, without either party being aware of it, a third interlocutor, preferably a pious individual with benefic powers, would have to intervene by casting their blessing on them to negate the harmful effects, usually with a simple glance at the victim. Plutarch's Moralia, Volume 8, includes a series of table talks, discussions between Plutarch and his compatriots. Much of the conversation revolves around the nature of the evil eye, eorai. Plutarch describes how envy functions just as the evil eye, and could act independently of one's will, without the desire to inflict harm, but still manage to maintain its destructive effects. At one point, Gaius asks why Plutarch did not discuss Democritus' theory of idola that can implant themselves into a human psyche, causing damage to mind and body alike. Plutarch's response is rather unsettling, in that it suggests that such emanations, fiery emanations if we follow Rabbi Loew's description, actually begin to act as independent entities with full intentions of their own. This again brings up the notion of the autonomy of psychic complexes and thought forms. That contrary to a ratio-reductionist materialism, our thoughts and emotions act as beings in the cosmos that comprise the infinite rays of the planetary spheres. Moral of the story: be cautious when exploring the imaginal realm, for it contains all sorts of heavens and hells, and all manner of things in between. Happy Halloween.